In the deep emerald shadows of the black forest, where the trees stand like silent sentinels and the mist clings to the valley floors, a young boy used to look upward. While the world around him was rooted in the ancient soil of Germany, his mind was often wandering among the stars. This was not the start of a traditional artist's journey, one defined by brushes or clay, but rather the beginning of a lifelong obsession with the mechanics of sight. For Thomas, the world was never just a collection of objects. It was a series of optical puzzles waiting to be unraveled. Growing up in such a landscape, one might expect a romantic's heart to emerge, a soul dedicated to capturing the majestic beauty of nature. But the boy in the Black Forest was different. He was fascinated by the telescope, by the way a glass lens could bridge the impossible distance between a human eye and a burning star. He realized early on that we do not see the universe as it is. We see it through the tools we build. This realization that the truth is always mediated by a machine would become the heartbeat of his life's work. When he eventually made his way to the industrial heart of the Rhineland to study, he entered an atmosphere that was as cold and precise as a laboratory. The academy was a place of rigorous discipline, where the chaotic emotions of the previous generation were being replaced by a new analytical clarity. Here, he learned that a camera was not a magic wand used to capture the soul, but a technical instrument. His mentors taught him the value of the archive, the importance of the series, and the power of the objective gaze. Yet, even as he mastered the art of the perfect, clear-eyed document, a question began to gnaw at him. If the camera is objective, why do we trust it so much? And what happens when we push that objectivity until it breaks? He began to look at his own generation, the people he sat with in cafes and walked with through the gray streets of the city. He saw them not as characters in a drama, but as surfaces. He began to photograph them with the same clinical detachment one might use to document a piece of machinery or a public building. He stripped away the distractions of background and expression, leaving only the raw data of the human face. These were not portraits in the sense of revealing a secret inner life. They were maps of skin, hair, and bone. By blowing them up to a scale that dwarfed the viewer, he turned the familiar into something alien. Looking at these giant, unblinking eyes, the viewer realized they weren't seeing a person, they were seeing the idea of a person, constructed through light and chemistry. As the years turned, the world underwent a silent revolution. The dark room, with its smell of vinegar and its dim red glow, began to give way to the flicker of the computer screen. While many of his peers clung to the purity of film, he embraced the change with a scientist's curiosity. He understood that the digital world wasn't just a new way to take pictures. It was a new way to inhabit reality. He stopped needing to stand behind a tripod to be a photographer. The world was already overflowing with images, satellite maps, internet archives, scientific data, and newspaper clippings. He realized that the modern artists didn't need to add more stuff to the world. They needed to make sense of the visual blizzard already surrounding us. He began to hunt for images rather than capture them. He looked at the heavens again, but this time not through his own telescope. He used the eyes of great observatories, taking their data and reimagining it. He was fascinated by the way a photograph could travel across the void of space, filtered through sensors and transmitted as code, only to land on the screen as a beautiful, haunting swirl of gas and light. Was it a photograph of a nebula or was it a photograph of data? To him, the distinction didn't matter. What mattered was the journey of the image itself. There is a certain bravery in his willingness to destroy the very thing he creates. At one point, he became obsessed with the failures of the digital age, the way an image breaks apart when it is compressed too far. He took tiny, low-resolution files from the early internet and stretched them until they became vast landscapes of colored squares. These pixels were the grain of the new century. By making them beautiful, he forced us to look at the skeleton of our digital lives. He showed us that even in the noise of a corrupted file, there is a rhythm and a ghost of the original truth. His studio became a place of alchemy, though not the kind involving lead and gold. It was an alchemy of the mind. He would take images of the world's darker corners, the places where surveillance cameras hum in the night or where the machinery of war operates in the shadows, and he would strip them of their context. By manipulating the colors, by layering them, or by stripping them of their detail, he turned them into something poetic and terrifying. He wanted to know, can an image be beautiful if it represents something horrific? Can we find peace in a picture that was born from a machine designed to watch us? Throughout his journey, he has remained a man of the shadows, preferring to let the work speak in its own cold, booming voice. He doesn't seek to tell you how to feel. He doesn't offer the comfort of a decisive moment or a heartwarming story. Instead, he offers a mirror. When you stand before his vast creations, you are forced to confront your own relationship with seeing. You realize that every image you have ever consumed, from the news on your phone to the family photos in your drawer, is a construction. He has spent his life peeling back the layers of the medium like a surgeon. He explored the history of the craft, going back to the days before the camera even had a lens, experimenting with the way light shadows itself onto paper. He moved into the three-dimensional, using computers to generate photographs of things that never existed in the physical world at all. In doing so, he reached the ultimate frontier of the medium, the point where the camera is no longer necessary, but the logic of the photograph remains. In his later years, the boy from the Black Forest has come full circle. He still possesses that same sense of wonder he felt when looking at the stars, but it is tempered by a profound understanding of the limitations of the human eye. He has taught us that the photograph is not a window, it is a wall. It is a surface onto which we project our desires, our fears, and our history. His story is one of constant evolution. It is a reminder that to be an artist is not to find a style and stay there, but to be a permanent immigrant in the land of ideas. He has moved from the analog to the digital, from the microscopic to the cosmic, and from the personal to the universal, without ever losing his fascination with the how of things. He is a philosopher with a lens, a man who realized that in an age where everything is recorded, the most radical thing you can do is ask what a recording actually is. Capturing his life isn't about listing dates or exhibitions, it's about capturing a shift in human consciousness. It's about that moment when we stopped believing that seeing is believing and started understanding that seeing is a complex, beautiful, and often deceptive act of creation. He remains in his studio, perhaps looking at a screen, perhaps looking at the sky, still searching for the next way to show us that the world is much more and much less than it appears to be. He reminds us that while the light may be captured in a box or a chip, the mystery of why we look remains as vast and unreachable as the stars above the Black Forest.